Good afternoon, everybody. DMGeezerjim here. Hope everyone is doing well. Continuing along in my classic module review series, we're going to pick up where we left off after G1. We're going to go over to G2, the Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant Jarl. Kind of similar to the last module review. I want to do a side-by-side comparison between the original G2 and the original Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant and the 5th edition as it was presented in Tales from the Yawning Portal. First and foremost, thanks for joining me. As always, appreciate you being here. Feel free to leave anything in the comments, questions, concern, anything, man. I love engaging in the comments, and I know I appreciate the feedback and the follow up. Secondly, I'm over on Twitch 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. through 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, U.S. Central Time. Same tag. All my stuff's here on YouTube. You can follow that over to my channel. If you ever want to just drop in and chit chat and talk some D&D, I'm there 5 days a week. I'd love to hear from you guys. Questions, comments, concerns there as well. But yeah, enough about my stuff. Let's get to it here. For reference sake, we're still using the PDF version of the PDF copy of the 1981 version, Dungeon Module G1, 2, and 3 against the Giants. On the right side, you'll see the D&D Beyond overlay, the D&D Beyond presentation of the same information for Tales from the Yawning Portal. Let's get some visuals out of the way real quick. I'll hit that one day. This is the Glacial Rift according to G2, the upper level, and it's an identical layout in Tales from the Yawning Portal, all the way down to the numerization, the keying. 1 is 1, 14 is 14. The rooms are lining up identical in regards to the labeling of them, as well as the presentation of the layout. Before I go too far, spend a couple minutes talking about this, so hopefully I don't have to repeat myself too often on it. G2 is my favorite out of the three. With both versions, whether it's the Tales from the Yawning Portal, the original, I really appreciate the Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant. Feels like a unique presentation of a dungeon. We're getting out of angular, straight corridors and square rooms. We're getting into more of a natural feel and a natural cavern type thing. Double down that it was really built to be an ice type of a fortress, kind of a natural rift, a natural glacial rift and natural series of ice caves that have been taken over by a Frost Giant tribe and turned into their full-blown fortress. So this is supposed to be a Frost Giant town, Frost Giant city. One of the big issues that I have with it, and this is both versions, is the scale and the size of the stronghold. I understand the logistics. We need to be able to make this and put it on a one-page map. Back in the old days, it still had to basically work on an 8.5 by 11 modified to print out, so on and so forth. This is before they started splitting our maps on trifolds. For some reason, I think they should have on this one. Doesn't matter. Lots of dungeon levels here to begin with. But Giants are big, and whichever version of this map you look at, you're seeing a lot of small passageways. So by default, if you use the 10-foot square, 10 foot per square scale, your Giants in both versions are going to be at a disadvantage in regards to moving through. Now, this is their home, so I don't know that any creature is going to live somewhere where it's going to be in a constant disadvantage when it's moving around. Double that down with intelligent creatures. Triple that up with the fact that Frost Giants are considered very warlike. They're setting their home up to be defendable, but you can't necessarily defend your home by being restricted in your own movement through it. So, before we even get into creature counts, the defenders are going to be a disadvantage, especially on the upper levels, due to the size of the dungeon. A 10-foot square is 4x4. A giant won't fit in a 4x4 if you look at a 4x4 token. So a giant's going to be a 3x3 token, 9 squares, 15 square foot doesn't necessarily even line up with being able to fit through a passage without having to squeeze. So first and foremost, decide early on if you want to mentally see this as a giant outpost or if you see this as a giant city. If you see this as a village or a large stronghold, do yourself the favor, rescale the map, think of each square as 10 yards, 30 feet per square, redraw it accordingly, give your giants the opportunity to move freely within their own home, within their own glacier. The downside of that is that can definitely end up overwhelming your party because now the giants can see and hear and move through every single thing. And you certainly are going to have a monstrosity of a map if you try to put it on a one pager. So then you start getting into mapping into sections. That's my preferred method. Even though I drew it as written for my Patreon and my Etsy site. Personally, when running it, I run it at a much larger scale than the map that's there. Number two, so once that's out of the way, number two thing about to think about is the environmental factors of this. This is up in the high altitude, 20,000, 30,000 foot, somewhere in a high mountain range with gigantic glaciers. That's the only information you're given, so you have the freedom to use this in any setting, even your own homebrew world. As long as you find the geography to make it work, you drop this sucker straight in. There's not a whole lot of story tie-in outside of the original GDQ series. Even that, it was the second of 9 modules, so it was just a slight stepping stone into something bigger when you got here. So it's I would say it's low impact in regards to any pre-written storylines. You can definitely take it and either amp it up, or you can really lean into it and make it bigger than what it is and make it maybe an end piece for your campaign, or you can leave it on a smaller scale go with the 5th edition monster count and make it a little bit smaller of an affair. Placement is up to you. It's very flexible in regards to where or how you use it in your campaigns. There's information given in the 5th edition book to place it in the various settings. The 1st edition module was designed to work in the Grand Duchy area, that Barrier Peaks, in conjunction with the GDQ series. Design is not required by any way, shape, or form. So, placement in your world is up to you. Where is it at? What's it doing is up to you. The why there's certainly no why given in the Tales from the Yawning Portal. The storyline will in GDQ G1 through 3 will propel you through here. How much of that you want to use or how much of that you adapt, completely up to y'all. Freedom of use and freedom of choice for your campaign and your campaign world. That's kind of how I see it. Okay, the third thing, there's 2 points of entry into the Rift in both versions, so we'll just talk about that. When your party comes in, they're either coming through this tunnel, this long, frozen, sneaky tunnel that winds down, or they're climbing down the Rift. Being a big open, basically, think of a gigantic canyon in the top of a glacier. Top of it's open to the sun, it drops down, it widens up, and it drops down further, and it narrows down. In this case, it doesn't narrow out as much, it just flattens out. It's a pretty big canyon. At its widest point, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 110, 20, 120, 125 feet wide at its widest. According to the older map, it sat at a depth of 250 feet below the surface of the tunnels around it. So it's also deep. And it was another 150 to 200 feet above it. So to go from jumping or falling from the very top open part of the glacier to the very bottom was roughly 300 to 350 feet. So party certainly could climb down, fly down. Flight was covered. There's a lot of wind, a lot of buffeting conditions. So if your players are flying or levitating as they go anywhere in the canyon area, they're subjected to random movement based on the turbulence. Mechanics are given in the 1st edition book. They're mentioned in the 5th edition book. Something you should keep in mind. The frost giants love the cold, love the wind, love the snow, love the ice. Use that for your advantage as you're building out the area, whether it's mentally, theater of mind, or whether it's tactically on your map. Make sure that you're accounting for areas that are snow, deep snow, black ice, small pit holes that are covered in, maybe it's just a 3-foot deep crevice, 1 foot wide, 3 foot deep, small crack in the ice that's been filled in with snow that your party doesn't see. They can snip into it, end up restrained or something, or it could be a bigger one. They fall 70 feet. Figure out some ways to use the environment for your advantage, especially in the rift area, in the main canyon area, the lower area. That's rough, rocky, nasty terrain mixed in with the bottoms of the glacier, so it should be very unstable. Visibility is reduced. On visibility, within the caverns, within each of the little caves on their own, visibility follows your standard rules. It's actually considered slightly illuminated with this weird bluish glow. Outside in the canyon area, the rift area that you're following along on the outsides of this, let me pull this one up a little bit more. We'll zoom in. That'll help out a little bit. I know this one's uglier, but it's actually easier to define. You see where the hash marks on the squares have been made into 5-foot squares are all considered exposed areas. This is wind and snow and ice and bad cliffs and all that kind of stuff. This is exposed to the sky. Anything that's listed as a single hatching is hidden in. So consider that difficult, bad, nasty, horrifying terrain for your players as much as possible. Giants be giants, it doesn't really bother them. Hell, giant footsteps in snow can become difficult terrain for your party. Think of ways to be creative about using the terrain that's given in a ultra high altitude, super cold, icy environment, and make sure that it's, I don't necessarily say punishing, but at least challenging for your party to deal with environmental factors as much as going in and just whooping giant booty. Okay. Difficulty checks should be scaled based on based on your party's ability and based on how you want to play it out. There are some guidelines given in G1 in the 5e book. I think they're a little bit lenient. This is a high-level module. Shouldn't have a DC 12 to walk along a snowy pass. That's basically a gimme for anyone but a wizard at this level. So, kind of keep that in mind. That the difficulties DC checks that are given in the fifth edition can kind of scale a little bit poorly with the level of creatures that they're dealing with, the difficulty in the environment, and the abilities of your players. So if it's so low that you think it's a gimme, then let it be a gimme. If you think it should be harder, then make it harder and make sure you have reason why. Environmental things, one thing that I try to keep in mind, namely because kind of touching back on what I started, the problem, the challenges with this adventure. Heavy spell use. You can very easily dissuade the big boomers by covering all the ceilings with icicles. Icicles big and small. If there's enough of a vibration, they hear the cling of glass, 1 or 2 falls here. If there's a big ass, they do thunderclap or thunder wave or fireball or something, then a shower of them comes down. Give me some dexterity checks. Save versus DC 18 dexterity. 66 piercing. If you save, you get half. Is that punishing? I think that's making an environment dangerous. And I think if you give your players the clues that that's going on, then it's up to them to adjust their tactics, especially at this level. They shouldn't be restricted at level 10, 8 to 12, with just bada boom, go in, boom. Challenge their thinking abilities and their skills by using the environment to assist the giants, okay? Consider making the scale of the map larger to assist your giants to move around. But above all else, we'll get kind of into the real quick comparison on the two. It's a creature count. There's a big difference in the creature count between the G1 version and the G3 version. It's a little bit more dramatic than we talked about in studying the Hill Giant. Considerably more, a higher of a reduction. Example would be Area 1, the Grand Entry Cavern. The first, is this the right one? Oh, I'm on the lower area. Apologies, let me scroll up to 1. 3 pages, the entire thing's covered in 3 pages in G1 through 3. Decent chapter in Against the Giants here. Same stuff though. Let me read the 5th edition version. 1 Frost Giant keeps watch here at all times to prevent any unauthorized use of the long passage that leads south. If combat goes against the giant, he flees through this passage to give a warning of intruders to the guards at area 9 and 10. The room contains piles of hides, a giant sack, and a pile of rocks and ice chunks for hurling. The guard certainly hurls missiles if not immediately forced into melee. His treasure is at area 6. Note that the giant in area 2 will hear sounds of combat and rush to aid his comrade and vice versa. Okay. Guard Cave 2. Real quick, just for reference. This is why we have this map up. We're talking about room 1, room 2 here. They're the same location on the 5e map. We're just using this one because it's quicker to flip to. 5e gets a little onerous. D&D Beyond gets onerous if I go back and forth too quickly. 1 Frost Giant waits here on standby guard. On the floor of the cave are a pile of sleeping skins and 2 bags. The guard has an ample supply of rocks and ice blocks at hand for hurling at opponents. If the giant hears noise from area 1, he rushes there to help. Conversely, if attacked, he will raise a cry to the guard from area 1 to aid him. So one guard here, one guy responsible for guarding this room, one guy responsible for guarding this room. In all likelihood, it's a 50-50 chance that the party comes in here when they begin. Come in here, dead end. Either way, they're going to encounter one Frost Giant according to 5th edition. What's 1st edition got to say about this? 4 Frost Giants lair in this place at all times to prevent any authorized use of the South Passage. If any combat is going against them, one of their numbers will flee down the passage to give warning of intruders to the guards at area 9 and 10. Exact same thing I read in the 5e. Same as Hill Giant. We're not going to go too far into, verbatim, but it is. It is almost a verbatim reproduction. Aside from the fact, if you notice that the 1st edition G2 has 4 Frost Giants here on guard, with 1 retreating as soon as things go bad. 5e has 1 Frost Giant who will engage and then try to run if things go bad. This is where I have to get a little bit ugly. With 5th edition rules, how quickly is a giant-sized token, which is 3 square by 3 square, aka 15 feet wide, going to make their way down a 5 to 10 foot wide passage? So, space is immediately an issue, putting your creatures at a disadvantage, kind of what we talked about. I could do this ad nauseum. I'm going to try really hard not to, I promise. I don't want to repeat myself too often, but perfect example of how the space of the layout of the dungeon work against the creature. Double that down with the fact that there's supposed to be 4 of these guys in the first guard room, sending 1 to retreat, and now in 5th edition we have 1 who, if starts getting beat up, is going to run down that passage. He ain't going to make it down that passage, man. Hell, 1 with 3 of them covering his back is going to be likely to make it down that passage against a fresh party. Room 2 has 3 Frost Giants that will respond. So that's where it suddenly becomes a challenge. I get it. 5th edition reduces it to 2. 1st edition could potentially have 7 giants squashing the party in these tunnels. So maybe all of a sudden having small passages to keep your giants from moving in large groups is not a bad thing, so you don't suddenly overwhelm your party. But if there's only 2, then that's not even an issue. They could wait in their own rooms and die just the same as they're going to wait if they try to go into each other's rooms, because there's only 2 of them. So there's your balancing act. I think with the first one, with G2, these smaller tunnels were designed to help the party manage the large cluster of creatures that they would have to fight, because this is a heavily inhabited and heavily defended fortress, but the giants do have issues with movement. G2 in 5th edition Tales from the Yawning Portal completely removes that factor by reducing the giant forces to so minimal that it is literally 1 fight per room. Walk in, kill giant, go next room. Walk in, kill giant, go next room. So I think, honestly, as much as I love G2 and as much as I respect, a lot of the 5th edition translations, they do a real piss poor job, excuse the language, on the Tales in the Yawning Portal G2 version of it. The monsters, the amount of giants, the amount of creatures, the layout of the fortress, as nice and accurate it is not an inherent threat to your party in any way, shape, or form unless you start including a lot of environmental factors. So let's throw that out there, okay? And at the risk of, I'm not even going to repeat myself. The same situation repeats itself throughout the dungeon. Room 13 there's some of the smaller rooms, for example, the Yetis. There's a bunch of Yetis in room 13 in both versions. That's one of the few things that's similar, but, 6 Yetis in the ice cavern here with a big Yeti marked at A. It's not an extra, it's just 1 of 6. In the original one, let's look 13, has 6 Yetis, and then the additional Yeti leader. So there's 7. So that's one that's actually accurate. Great, Let's go to Snow Leopards in Ice Cave 15. Ice Cave 15 here was also Snow Leopards. So the smaller creature count is same. 5th edition is like, yeah, the party can handle 6 Yetis. They can't handle 4 giants. They should be able to at this level. The Barracks Complex is a really good reflection of this. 16 through 19 is the same on both. This is going to give a list of the total. Room 16, 17, 18, and 19. A grand total of 4, 4, 6. We're at 14 plus 4 is 18 giants in those 4 rooms. 1, 2, 4, 5. 14 has become 5. Okay, 5 giants is a threat. 14 is overwhelming odds. That was by design. Your party wasn't supposed to ever just roll into the living room with the Frost Giants, kick the door down, sit on the couch, eat their popcorn and their TV while they beat them with sticks. This is their home. 5th edition reduces the monster count to where it's nearly impossible for your giants to defend their home, especially combined with the difficulty of movement. If you're following rule as written, the giants are going to be moving through here. Almost every square that's not a cave is going to be difficult terrain. So we've reduced the number to next to nothing, and we've impaired their movement as part of the adventure. That's part of the design flaw, original and new. So yeah, as much as I'm a fan of this module, as much as between the three, G2 is my favorite. It's the least favorite in the Tales from the Yawning Portal. They've reduced the numbers and the difficulty of this so badly. It's kind of a mediocre adventure in the middle of it on the 5th edition scale. But rest assured, you have plenty of reference material in the 1st edition to kind of find yourself a middle ground. You still have to account for tokens and space and all of that. I get it. If we looked at this 18 giants, in all honesty, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 18 giants physically is not going to fit in this space and still have room to maneuver according to 5th edition placement. Get it. Okay, but why are we taking 18 to 4, man? Let's take 18 to 6, 18 to 8. It's up to you as a DM. You have that freedom. No one's telling you can't. Nothing's stopping you from doing it. Just use your own judgment based on how your rule sets play out, how your actual logistics are set up. If you're playing Theater of the Mind, you have a little bit more space to play around with it. We're not following a gridding system where they can say, why are those giants standing in each other's space? We're not super worried about that with Theater of the Mind. Virtual tabletop, miniature-based tabletop, you definitely have to be cognizant because of the base size of the minis, the base size of the tokens, how many creatures are in a given area. So balance increase in the difficulty of the module in 5th edition terms by the amount of space it's going to have. 1st edition, guys, this is me looking at us eye to eye. We all know 18 giants can't fit in those 4 caves the way it's drawn. We still played it that way. Use a bit of logic sense, but again, the Theater of the Mind, we always had that freedom. The room seemed to grow as it needed to in our brains to accommodate more and more creatures, even though we just described the room as 30 feet wide. A giant enters the room. Cool. Another giant enters the room. Okay, the mind's eye is able to do that, whereas a virtual tabletop isn't. So being mindful of that as you go. But yeah, environmental factors, visibility is an issue. Levitation, flying is affected by the weather conditions, and above all else, there should not be a safe place in these caverns or in these rifts for your players to take a rest without being assisted by magic. Magic being Leomund's tiny hut, portable hole, Mordenkainen's mansion, whichever method that they want to use can be used here, unless you decide otherwise. But other than that, they have to leave the rift to rest. So if they came down on ropes and stuff goes sideways, those ropes are not going to be there. They're going to have to potentially, let's just say our group, and this is where RTFM comes in, DMs. You've heard me say that, read the frickin' module, read the frickin' manual. That's going to hold the same here. Know what's in each of these rifts, each of these areas, especially if your group is coming down vertically, especially if they're dropping down on ropes or flying down. They could land at a number of ledges. So depending on where they land, you need to have an idea of those encounters prepared. Becomes a little bit more challenging of a module for a VTT if you have to have a potential 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 encounters ready, depending on where they land if they come down vertically. Okay, however they come down is up to them. However they come down is more up to you than it's up to them. But they're they will have to leave to rest. If they don't have the magic to take care of it, they're going to have to evacuate. So that could become its own thing. If they came down here at this ledge here at 11, then they're going to have to fight their way up through these groups at 8 and 9 to get to this cliff to either climb down and try to come to this ledge. They're still going to have to explore it. So no matter where your party comes down, they have to spend some time exploring and orienting themselves to the rift. It's designed for multiple incursions in its original form. The monster count in 5th edition will not support multiple incursions. A good, well-armed group can come in here, take care of business, and be out before they need a long rest, at least on the upper level. Lower level might be day 2 of it. But yeah, there's not enough enemies presented unless they just have really bad luck. 5th edition version of G2 is just not much of a threat to the monster count. Okay. So yeah, like I said, I don't want to go... There's not a whole lot more to say about it other than some of the specific fun things. So let's go ahead and talk about a few of those, a few of the more detailed encounters that are fun to run rather than grumbling about how different they are. The Ice Caverns is a fun little... it's a trophy haul. There's a bunch of people that are frozen there. Some of them have really good weapons. Some of them have some armor of vulnerability, a cursed item. But your party should see all of these humanoids that are frozen in battle poses or, oh, please don't kill me poses, just basically ice statues that are there. If your party wants to do some gray robbing and hacking and slashing at Encounter Area 5 is a fun place to do that. The long tunnel down. There's not a lot of wandering monsters given in either version. It tells you in the older version that you're supposed to be rolling regularly for random encounters. Tells you the same thing in the 5th edition. On an hourly basis, you should be rolling a d12 on a roll of 1. You choose one of 4 small encounters. Nothing big given here. The original version was probably about the same. Yeti, Frost Giant, Ogres, and Winter Wolves. Yeah, counts were a little bit different because you could run into 1 to 3 Frost Giants instead of just 1. But yeah, overall, honestly, the main reduction is Frost Giants and Ogres. Everything else seems to be similar for your upper areas. 12 Ogres was reduced to 6, so on and so forth. So yeah, on and on and on. A couple things to keep in mind. There's a few creatures that exist in 1E that they kind of ported over the white pudding, treated as a black pudding, but it's white. You can't see it in the snow. For all intent and purposes, an invisible creature is going to eat your boots out from under you. Sinkholes, 12-foot diameter, 100-foot deep crevices throughout the area, which can also lead to the lower level. Big old remoras, and I think that's kind of one of the fun yet unusual creatures on both of it. I'm glad they did include it. Actually, that was the first placement of a remoras within a dungeon that made sense for us. This cyst down here at 28 is basically this gigantic hollow ice dome. The constant radiating heat of the remoras continues to melt the ice around it, making its own cavern, its own cyst. So the remoras that hangs out down there is a different encounter. Suddenly will throw your team for a whirl, especially if they load it up for bear and thinking everything here is going to be resistant to frost and will take a lot of fire, and the remoras gets empowered as they blast at it. On that note, as we get a little bit closer to the end of this, one of the big complaints that we had with Steading of the Hill Giant is there was a very limited amount of creatures in it. You had Hill Giants, you had Ogres. I'm talking about the 5th edition version. 1st edition had even less. But you had Hill Giants, Ogres, Dire Wolves, Orcs. I think there were some Carrion Crawlers, a Fire Giant, a Frost Giant, and Troglodytes. 8. So we have the same 8 here, minus the Carrion Crawler and the Frost Giant, or the Carrion Crawler and Troglodytes, but they've been replaced by Yetis and a Remoras. So we're still at 8. We've added We've added dragons in here. We've added puddings in here. We have a storm giant in here. We have a cloud giant in here. So we're up to 12-ish now. So you're getting a little bit more of a variety of creatures in the 5th edition version than you had in the 2nd edition version, or 1st edition version. I always think 2nd because I'm thinking G2, the OG version. I just need to say that right. The OG version, brought more creatures to the table than in either form. So you're getting a little bit more of a variety when it comes to playing here, which is why I get a little disappointed. It's like, man, this is a great layout of a dungeon. It's a bunch of cool monsters. They actually make sense for where they're at, and 5th edition is going to cut them in half, and 1st edition is going to put them in tiny little boxes. This is a home brewer's dream, man. Again, without repeating myself, I'll definitely leave it at that. Say, take this sucker, blow it up, turn it into a Frost Giant city, and let it become an epic finale for your combat, for your campaign, or a major stepping point for your campaign. So, level 2 does, and we'll go ahead and flip to this one real quick as we finish out the stream. Again, reflections of differences. A pair of young white dragons. The original actually. Let me go back. My apologies. So we can do a little bit more of a side to side because that's what we're doing. The lower level has an adult, large ancient male and adult female, and the 5E's reduced it to where'd we go? Come on, sorry. I want to make sure we're being accurate here. You out again?
Not yet. Almost.
Not yet. Okay, lower levels, general features. Let's get to it here. 2 young white dragons. 2 dragons is still a tough fight. But yeah, it repeats itself. Most of the creatures in the lower level, there's a few more. It wasn't reduced as much as the upper level, but there's still a major reduction in force to be prepared for on level 2 of the dungeon. The layout of the map makes a little bit more sense in regards to giving your giants maneuvering room. There's actually 10 and 15-foot passages between most of the giant areas as opposed to little 5-foot passages that they can barely fit through. So the lower level does absolve a little bit of the risk of narrowed down choke points that your party's going to have on the upper level, but it's negating the fact of it's going to negate the weather effect. You're not going to have as much ice. You're not going to have as much snow. You're not going to have the wind. So there's plus and minuses with the transition. This is where we're actually getting into the mountain and into the dungeon of the rift. So you're getting into stone here. The tricks you're using for stalactites, stalagmites, icy conditions don't hold as much water. They can if you want, but thematically they don't necessarily make as much sense on the lower level. 5E has increased our monster count to compensate slightly. It hasn't reduced it as badly. That's a more accurate way to say it. So yeah. Last couple minutes just to talk about how are we using it. I've been kind of mentioning that back and forth as we've gone. This is a great design in regards to you can drop it into and out of your counters if you want. If you increase the scale and the size of the map to match up with its inhabitants, it can become a very epic, gigantic, giant Frost Giant city. Lots of video games have repeated. I'm not even going to try to repeat, but you know what to say. You can turn it into a big epic conclusion or a major stepping point in a higher level campaign. You leave it as it is in the scale. That's fine too. Just make sure that you understand that you need to use the environment a little bit more to balance encounters. Otherwise, your giants are going to be at a disadvantage the entire time. And lastly, if you're using the 5th edition version of it as written, for the level of your players that are involved in it, make sure that consider increasing the monster count a little bit. In most of the cases, you could, where it says Hill Giant or Frost Giant, you could double that number without overwhelming your party, without worrying about space comparisons, without worrying about compromising the ability to move in the given area, without even having to remap. Just consider doubling the amount of Frost Giants, which will give your party a much greater challenge. This is the second of the 3 modules. Hill Giant was the noob zone, and Hill Giant had way more active combatants and way more active threats than the Frost Giant zone. And so we have weather, we have the difficulty exploration, we have all of that, but there's no threat from the monsters. So yeah, man, that's going to be kind of my parting advice here. 1st edition, guys, don't be silly about it. You can't put 23 giants in a 40-foot by 40-foot room. It just doesn't work. And there are a couple of rooms in the G2 original that have 13 giants in a 40-foot wide by 60-foot long cavern. They could fit, but ain't no one moving. So balance that on your side. 5th edition people, understand, if you run it as written, straight out of the book, your players, this is going to be a pushover. Your players might enjoy the setting, but they're not really going to feel threatened. They're not going to feel challenged unless they're really dumb, or unless they're just really bad with their resource management, or have the most horrifying luck. As written, 5th edition is just not a challenging version of it, in my opinion. Find yourself the middle ground in there. Consider increasing the scale, etc. But above else, man, that's really it. Great module, great layout, great environmental effects if you use them as a dungeon master. That's more for us to have to manage. Are we going to use cold damage on our party over repeated time? Or are we going to let them bundle up super huge and thick and take away dexterity bonuses? Are we going to use a ring of warmth, and it doesn't matter. All of a sudden, we now have a setting, not a setting, but a location, a module, an adventure, that having a ring of warmth will be a good thing, because now you're not going to take cold damage as you're marching through the rift. Amp up the environmental aspect, the environmental damage, to put some urgency on it. Yeah, if so, say like we're wanting the 5th edition rule is written. You immediately notice after the third encounter, your party is mowing through this stuff. So start dropping D12 of frost damage on them every 10 minutes. Make them use some of their spell slots and resources to heal, or make them use some of their spell slots to get the cold resistance up, or make sure that they understand they're now on a timer. They can't sit here and fight forever. It's too cold. We need to get back to our cave, get a fire, get a get a long rest, and come back for round two. That's a way to use the environment to really kind of control the pace if you want to, you know, increase the difficulty without having to manage 1,000 giants. You can simply turn on the deep freeze effect. Visibility is an issue. The closer they are to the rift, the closer they are to the canyon, the less they can see. Goes both ways, so you can kind of also self-contain regions of the map without worrying about too much bleed over effect. That is one of the positives, as much as I'm going to grumble about it. That is one of the positives about having the more narrowed down tunnels and access points along the ledges. While it limits the giant movement, also does prevent your party from getting overwhelmed by 100 frost giants. But at the same time, that gives you the opportunity to use the environment. Use rock collapses, use ice collapses. Don't let them drop the big bombs without dropping the ceiling on them. We're high level now, guys. Well, mid tier going into upper tiers. The party needs to be prepared and you know, pay consequences for poor tactical decisions. That includes environment. It's not always about monsters. It's not always about, oh, the 2 giants saw you. It's okay. Yeah, you're gonna do a shatter spell. Great. You know, look at what that does. You took out the central column of ice that's supporting the ceiling. We're gonna spend another 2 hours digging out, etc. You know, I'm not saying be a dick about it. I'm not saying, you know, be malicious. But use the environment to make them think. Use the environment to make them use their resources in other ways. And so, yeah, G2 is a great opportunity to do that. But hey, guys, I'm going to close this video up. Thank you for joining me for part 2, G2, studying of the Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant Jarl. We'll be working on G3, the Fire Giant, Hall of the Fire Giant King next. And then I'm going to dip into Against the Giants, the Liberation of Joff, and Storm King's Thunder. They all kind of seem to flow together, so it feels kind of good to segue. And maybe if you're enjoying the series, that brings you back for more next time. But yeah, thank you for your time. Whether you've been here for a few minutes, whether you've been for the whole video, whether you're catching it all at once or bit and pieces, I appreciate you sharing your time with me. I hope you're enjoying it. I hope you're learning something from it. This is the same with the rest of my videos. Like, follows, do the subscribes, do all that. Let your friends know. Feel free to join me over on Twitch. Drop something in the comments. Let me know you're here if you enjoyed it. If you didn't enjoy it, the sound was funky. If you don't like my hat, you know, let me know. I mean, obviously, don't hurt my feelings too bad. But I do enjoy. I do appreciate you guys taking the time out to watch me. I love seeing the comments, and I appreciate the interaction. More than happy to continue doing that, and hopefully we'll continue. Not hopefully, we'll continue to see you guys more. Be safe out there. Take care.